There's a really cool article. I wanted to talk about this. If you've ever played TFT, you're probably familiar with Dog. This is the person who handles all of the, or not all, but is the lead designer on TFT. So this is an article about Dog grinding to hit the top rank in the game, the top 250 players. There is often an expectation or a thought that people say that like, hey, the developers, they suck at this game. They don't understand the game like top players. This comes up all the time in fighting games as well, right? Where like people are like, the devs, they must not know how to play this game because the changes are so bad. Maybe they just don't know how to fucking play the game. So this is written by Dog. TLDR, in this dev blog, I break down 3 reasons why the expectation of a dev to be highly ranked in the game is not a worthwhile effort for creating a better game. The story starts with me finally making Challenger. So Challenger is like the top 250 players on the ladder. The expectation that to work on a game, you must be at the top of the game's player base is a problem that persists through the entire games industry, not just TFT or League of Legends. People have said this about fighting games. Moss brought up the Bonchan quote earlier. He said essentially like the people who just like made the changes on Balrog must be kindergartens. Like they don't understand the game. And like people have said that stuff for all kinds of things. Like saying like if this person's diamond, they really don't understand the game. They're only in the top 4% of the player. You're only in the top 4%. I mean, this comes up for commentators, but it comes up for like this is so common. So he says time commitment. Game devs work 40 plus hour work weeks. And while a small portion of that work time involves playtests, these playtests are not done on the live servers. Instead, they are done in environments where we often are trying our best to break the game, see what fails and what prevails. So I've talked to a lot of fighting game devs. I played a lot of fighting game devs in games, and almost always when I play them, they're like, "Oh yeah, I haven't played the current version of the game in like months. I've been playing the new characters, I'm playing the new changes, like I'm doing stuff with the character that it's not going to work until the next season or the next patch." No part of this 40-hour work week consists of climbing the ranked ladder. Now, ideally, devs are also playing their game a bit outside of work, and trust me, we all are. But how much time are we reasonably supposed to spend outside of work? It took me close to 400 games in 2 months to reach Challenger, which amounts to more than 300 hours in 8 weeks. That is a lot. That, in addition to already working full-time on the game, is a recipe for burnout. You want your devs to have a healthy work-life balance and have experiences outside of TFT to make them more well-rounded. This is a great point. Wouldn't you want your fighting game developers, for instance, to like play KOF when it comes out? Like even non-fighting games, other games with good combat or action or things that would inspire them to come up with new ideas or improve on the game that they're working on. You want them to be able to broaden the things that they're trying so that they can make that experience better for you, while also being better and healthier people overall, which is pretty important. The highest rank in Street Fighter, hitting 300,000 points or whatever, is not just like, it's very attainable by a lot of players, but the amount of time necessary to hit that is astronomical. Regardless, good devs are still going to play the game they work on, and that's good. With that time, though, what do we want them to be doing? Do we want them to be grinding the ranked ladder by playing the way high-level guides already tell them to, practicing known combos or one-tricking a single champ, or would you rather use that time to figure out ways to make the game better? Trying champs that they don't play so they can understand what the pain points are, or figuring out why decks and cards don't work well at a high level? This is a great point. I'm not a game dev, but as a commentator, when I'm studying a game that I care about, I rarely watch high-level footage that is like the most common character, because we all know what happens in that match. It's why I always play all the DLC characters that come out, and I always try weird, strange pocket characters that may not always fit my style. The reason is so that you have a better, more broad understanding of the game. And this is a great point for devs. If you're playing the game and you want to climb on the ladder, the best way to do it is to play the best things in the game always. If you're a developer, and you want to know, like, okay, everybody says Jacko is weak, right? Does she need more help? And if so, what does she need help on, right? And to answer that question, you would probably have to watch or play the character and figure out what makes her weak or what makes her strong. Or what if it turns out that you actually find out that she is maybe pretty good, but maybe underexplored? Or you play her and you're like, okay, everybody's right. She does need some love, but what does she need? You can't really answer that question without the right data. If you want to know, like, oh, is Nagoriyuki good? Is Soul good? Is Leo good? Like, we all know that. We already have the data. I'll say personally, one of the reasons I never hit Challenger in previous tests was because I always focused on trying the non-meta stuff to discover what needed to be improved. But during this climb, I've avoided comps I'm not comfortable with. I've been sticking with the same few strong early game items, and I've played to win as opposed to learn. Devs already know what wins. We see it every day in our data. We hear about it every day from our top players. We live it every day in our balance discussion. What devs don't often see enough are things that are underplayed, underpowered, or have just yet to be discovered. And that's what a dev should be playing the game for. Whenever I would watch Combo Fiend go around and play Street Fighter V, and show off the game, he would be playing like new characters every single time. If I was a dev on Strive, I'd be playing Anji, or I'd be playing the characters that are less common and figure out, like, is this character actually bad? Like, what are their things that they're good at? What are the things I wish would work with them? If you're playing them and you're like, man, I'm experimenting with this character and everybody says they're bad, but if this one thing worked, I bet you they'd be so good. This would really make the character feel so much better. It gives you a more nuanced understanding of the characters in the game. I would much rather them like barely make it to heaven or like be in floor 10 or wherever they are, right? And like be playing a character that's underdeveloped to try to find how to make that character more fun or interesting in a future version. If you enjoy the games you play, you want it to be popular so that the game can thrive. The way to do that is to increase the game's appeal and accessibility for a wider audience. The truth that competitive players often push back on is that if you want millions of players, you need a game that millions of players can enjoy. High-level players and more junior designers will often make the mistake of designing games for themselves, which leads to very inaccessible games. You have to consider the game as a whole, not just at a very small fraction of the player base. This is extremely good or strong, but it's kind of not reflective of that at other levels, right? It's why we consistently ask ourselves what makes playing TFT fun, not just for ourselves at our skill and preferred playstyle, but for all players. Great example is like, what if you personally don't enjoy playing zoners or something, right? Or you think zoners being good is annoying. But like zoning needs to be a good, it needs to be a viable playstyle in the game, right? It's like a core part of fighting game design. If you are like the I hit buttons and go fast playstyle, you might not be the right person to weigh in on zoning being a viable playstyle for the game. Like, let's say you start playing a big slow grappler guy, and that's not your playstyle. And you're like, this slow grappler guy must suck. Like, I can't win. I don't know what to do, etc., etc., etc. I mean, that's not your preferred playstyle, and it's not your specialty. It might turn out that character is very good, or perfectly fine, or maybe slightly undertuned, or whatever it is, right? But it's hard to tell if you already have a bias against it and you don't enjoy playing it, right? You need a diverse group of people at all play levels and all in terms of preference on playstyle. Take our iterations on Silco. The early version of Silco had him never auto attack. Instead, he gained mana each second for each living ally and casted a buff on his allies as his spell. But the really exciting cast came at the end of the fight when he summoned a monster, but Silco could only summon the monster when he ran out of allies to buff with his spell. The goal had been to make it so that the player needed to keep their whole team alive for long enough to allow Silco's big cast to go off, but in practice it was just confusing, clunky, and required the player to build an all-tank army to stall for the big cast to go off. Gameplay like this can add a ton of unique depth and challenge to the game, but in practice they end up extremely unfun to play against and aren't intuitive for most of our players. Yeah, so maybe at a high level, Silco would be really good. And also maybe he would be really annoying. Like, oh my god, he just builds all tank and then Silco wipes out my team. Like, this is so stupid. You just stack a bunch of tanky units and then like he just kills me, and like if you do it right, it's so dumb. But then at a low level, no one can do it. Their Silco always dies, and they don't have enough tanks, and they're just like, man, this sucks. Silco doesn't do anything. It creates like a weird game plan separation where at different levels, the appeal of it versus the execution of it doesn't quite line up right, and you're just like, this sucks. Chloe and the team went back to the drawing board in efforts to create a play pattern that was easier to understand and more fun than the stall till you win strategy. There's a lot of shit like that in all games where it's like the low level strategy might be really hard to execute something, or a low level player, but the high level player can just execute it perfectly every time and it becomes so good. That becomes a common issue in fighting games in terms of execution, like mechanical difficulty, hands-on stuff. People will say things like, it's okay that this is so powerful because it's hard to do. It's okay that Johnny is incredibly good. Like, it's hard to do the stuff he's got to do. That's like such a tough thing because like, okay, maybe it's hard to execute, but at the top level, hard to execute becomes something you see in every match. These players are all capable of doing it, and they are twerking all over the best players in the world with it. It's no longer hard for them. It's very easy. At a low level, maybe that character is not effective at all. Like, they really cannot do what they want to do. So now at the high level, it's very frustrating to fight against the character because it's too powerful, it's doing too much, and everybody's just piloting the character near perfectly. And at a low level, this character is doing nothing. Yeah, we talk about this a lot, but in fighting games, tournament characters are characters that are strong but have simple, reliable game plans, right? There are characters that are top tier in fighting games but are not top tier in tournament because executing their game plans in stressful environments over long periods of time is really hard. Even though this character is incredibly good, the execution requirement and the strategy is so dense that playing them over a long period of time against high level opponents is so draining that they rarely get to excel the way they should at a high level, right? That kind of stuff can happen as well. So it's like there's a lot to consider there, which is really interesting. And it says, I'll tell you that answering these questions is a hell of a lot easier if you have a diverse group of devs. It takes more than just a bunch of high-level players to find and extract the essence of what makes games fun. And I'm proud to say that on the TFT team, we finally have that, and it shows with the continued popularity of gizmos and gadgets. Yeah, this is a fun set. I know this. I played a game. I was like sitting there playing Maya like for KI, like, and I remember finding this strategy that was so degenerate. I found it early, and everybody I played against despised it. Like they were like, this is so bad. And I remember being like, hey, this cannot stay like this. Is like, it's too annoying to deal with. As a player at the time, I would have loved if it stayed because it's really good for my character and it's really strong. But it was such a degenerate and cheap strategy so fast that I was like, look, this has gotta, you know what I mean? Like, this has kind of gotta go. And I remember other people, like, at the same time were like, maybe they didn't want to play their characters. They were, like, scared to show off their stuff. I remember my feedback and thoughts were like, I need people to see that what I'm doing here is too degenerate. And what they changed about the character ended up making the character more interesting, but maybe even a little weaker overall. The character lost some power for gaining stuff that was more fun to do and a little bit more interesting. From not the changes she had, she would throw her daggers, and if she throws her medium dagger twice, the next time she throws it and your opponent has blocked it, the next time she throws it, it would become unblockable, right? All I would do is I stopped throwing light daggers because I just wanted the unblockables. And all I would do is make somebody block the dagger twice and then do a button, throw the unblockable dagger, do a combo, get a hard knockdown, and then 50-50 them. And then if the 50-50 hit, I would do a hard knockdown again. If it didn't hit, I would make them block 2 daggers, unblockable them, and then do it again. And I would just continue to loop this really degenerate, strong strategy. I told them, I was like, this is what I'm doing. It's very strong. And they were like, yeah, that makes sense. So what they did was, when the unblockable dagger hits you with Maya now, it pops you up in the air. Her juggles in the air, not where lower damage a little bit, right? But it also made it so that she couldn't hard knock down and put you in the same position. And I was totally okay with that because I think the version of it before was not fun to deal with. It was like way too good. It was way too good, way too strong, way too safe. And I think it made the character a little less safe, a little less strong, but a little bit more interesting. And I think that's probably like for the better for the game. You know what I mean? It's important to get your thoughts on all these characters from all over the place, I think, too, because I don't know who else was playing Maya there. That kind of thing would have come up pretty quickly, probably, and like it would have not been fun to play again. So I'd rather it got changed there than it would have happened later on. So in closing, I wanted to bring attention to the psychological stresses that come with constantly performing to the best of your ability while playing your favorite game. It's so simple that we often forget we are gamers because gaming is fun. If a dev wants to kick back and reroll while catching up on the latest binge, they should absolutely be able to do that. Yeah, TFT you can watch or play while watching a show or stream or doing some random stuff. It's nice, actually. Pushing for higher ranks on the ladder is not the best use of time if the ultimate goal of the TFT dev or any other game is to make their game the best it can be. And I hope for those of you reading this that you'd agree. You want your favorite game devs to not burn out and the best they can be so their favorite game continues to be that, your favorite. It's a great article because I think the points in it make a lot of sense, right? When you think about them hitting the highest rank, like, oh yeah, this dev is the highest rank in the game, so we should respect their opinions. First of all, I don't know that it will necessarily even win people over either. Yeah, it's challenger, but like, who cares? Like, this game sucks. Like, I'm smarter. I'm top 10. He's only top 200 or what? You know what I mean? It's like some people are going to be snobby about it anyway. But the more important thing is the understanding of like, hey, the game is better when the developer is considering things that are not the strongest stuff in the game and like being smart about the things that are in need of some attention. It makes way more sense to spend time on that than it does to spend time sitting there grinding the best comps in the game over and over and over. I often will seek out people who play the weird, strange, underplayed characters that people think are weaker or not as common for that same reason, is that I want a deeper understanding of the game and those characters. Somebody like Gold Lewis versus Eno is a very unusual matchup. And Red Bull Kumite Finals was Gold Lewis versus Eno. And I knew the matchup because I had played Gold Lewis. Anyway, it's like, you know, you really have to spend some time with the uncommon stuff so that you know how it goes. When's Tekken 8? You know what's funny is like Street Fighter 6 announcing, they had their chairs and like they were like staring at Capcom and they're like Street Fighter 6 and everybody was like, well, hello there, Bandai Namco. Immediately, I just imagine everybody spun around. They're like, all right, when's time for Tekken 8? You tell me. And when Tekken 8 gets announced, it's like, all right, when's the new Dragon Ball game? Or when's the new this? Or when's the new that? You know what I mean? It creates that like, all right, where is that?